Hello and welcome to another edition of the Purple Theory Podcast, an analytical and whimsical podcast about Big 12 football, part of Dave Campbell's Republic of Football and presented in part by Home Field Apparel. I'm your host, Parker Fleming, and I'm joined tonight, as always, by my co-host and friend, Grant McGalliard, as we preview the Baylor Bears and their 2023 season. Grant, how are you this evening?
Parker, I'm doing well. We are without AC in Bay City, Texas, at my current domicile. So I am finally living the dream and podcasting from my parents' attic. So
after all the years and all the slander, Grant, you finally are living in your parents' basement and blogging it's great.
I'm a true podcaster.
Fulfilling the stereotype. Absolutely. We're back here with a second episode this week. I was thinking about what kind of banter, but we talked on Tuesday and that just not that many things happened to me. And the second episode this week in a move that many people are calling unnecessary and too much and asking why. But here we are making our way through these previews school by school and get to talk a little bit about Baylor.
I've always said assaulting listeners is the best way to go about it. So we're launching a full-fledged tank campaign across the Big 12 and our listeners' eardrums. So get ready.
As the wise man said, beatings will continue until listener morale improves. So
a long way to go.
Yeah.
But Parker,
way to go.
Can I tell you something?
Please do. I was about to beg you to have banter because I don't know.
No, well, I was just going to say, do you know what's really good for improving listener morale? It's telling them about the amazing deals at homefieldapparel.com.
Again, every time your home field lead-ins for me is like 50-50. Are we going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and ayahuasca? Or are we going to talk about home field? I don't know, man.
You cannot buy ayahuasca at homefieldapparel.com, but they are your one-stop shop for the best collegiate shirts and hoodies and sweatshirts, and in some cases, joggers around. Baylor, you are on homefieldapparel.com. You actually have some really cool stuff on Home Field, by the way. Go take a look at it. It's awesome. A lot of throwback gear. Really, really cool designs. There's anything you could want there. They're comfortable as all hell. Parker, as we get into the dog days of summer, you're going to want a light, breathable t-shirt. Home Field Apparel shirts are some of the most comfortable I have ever worn. I wore a Lucky Home Field shirt. I mentioned this at the Texas Tech podcast for TCU's entire run last year. Got me in the spirit for football. Georgia's full of freaks and monsters and golems, and Home Field does not insure against that, but they can ensure that you will stay cool and will stay comfortable and stay stylish as we hit summer. Our listeners can use the promo code DCTF for 15% off all new customers and 10% off for returning customers. Again, that's promo code DCTF at homefieldapparel.com. Thank you to Home Field for once again partnering with us and providing us with some incredibly soft t-shirts.
Yeah, very, very fun. Always big fan of the good brand as it were. Grant, we've got to talk about the Baylor Bears. We've talked about Texas Tech. I kind of thought before we did that, maybe we could share. And now I don't know. I'm doing this live. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to share, but I'm going to try.
Sure.
And I thought we could talk through our I thought that we could talk through our power rankings. Yeah. So can you see anything?
I can. Yeah, I can see the power rankings. That's
you
PFF,
can see the power rankings.
Well, now I see PFF.
No. Wait. No. What about now?
Now I see the power rankings.
Sick. Okay. Cool. So this is mine, and we had these starters things that we actually didn't end up using. Just doing some notes in there, but then we did notes in the Google Doc. So these are mine, and I'll show you mine. I show you Grant. We've done. Well, I guess I'm spoiling the Baylor one. So shoot, I got to block this out so that you guys can't see my ratings yet. But so we've done 5 teams so far. Again, ranking all of them by a specific number. And for the audio listeners here, I'll just run through it. We have quarterback is 15 points. Again, all this is out of 100. So quarterback is 15% of total. Running back is 10 points. Wide receiver is 10 points. O-line is 15 points, which gives you a total of 50 for the offense. Mm-hmm. And then on the defense, you have 15 points, 15 points for the defensive line. So the trenches in total are 30%. I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. And in true college football fashion, you have coaching is 15. So quarterback plus defense, quarterback plus trenches plus coaching and special teams is 60% of a team's rating, which I really like there. That's coaching is 15. You get a linebacker is 10 points and a defensive back is 10 points and out of 10 rather. And then the coaching is out of 15. That gives you a rating out of 100. And the two stats that we've kind of come up with there is how often would you win against an average team? Just win probability. And then if your team was if your schedule was entirely just those
Average
teams,
yeah.
it was really full of average teams, what's the probability you would do with the bowl? So far I have Texas Tech at 75, followed by TCU at 71, followed by Iowa State at 69, followed by Kansas and BYU tied at 63. I'm going to block out your Baylor ratings real quick because I haven't even seen them.
Wait, nobody look.
Nobody look. And then there we go. And then I'll look at yours, Grant. You have TCU at 72, Texas Tech at 70.5. This is the wrong Texas Tech red and the wrong Baylor green. I'm going to fix that.
Okay, fire me later.
Texas Tech at 70.5. Then you have BYU at 68, Kansas at 64, and Iowa State all the way down at 59. We'll see how the depths go for Iowa State. So, just a nice little comparison. We had somebody ask on Twitter about the rankings and keeping track and everything, and I figured this would be a nice way to just kind of pull them up, and then we'll try to tweet out screenshots and stuff. I get busy and forget about stuff, but so
far,
I think this is good.
So far, this might be kind of fun. What unit do we have as the best so far? Like, I have Tyler Shuck and Texas Tech's quarterback room as the highest rated unit that we've evaluated so far at a 12 out of 15.
Ooh. This is going to change for me tonight. I can almost guarantee it. I have Texas Tech's quarterback room as the highest overall out of 15, but then I did give TCU's wide receiver room a 10 out of 10.
True.
And so technically they would be the highest rated because that's 10 out of 10 for me. So I don't know where you
I had TCU's linebackers and defensive backs at a 9 out of 10.
Yep. And so that would be the highest there, a 90. So not, again, interesting to look and kind of compare and not necessarily anything that's, groundbreaking or crazy, but a good way to kind of touch back on them. So tonight we're going to talk about Baylor. We're going to talk about the Bears and how they might rebound from what might have been seen as a pretty disappointing 2022. Grant, before we do that, let's just talk generally about the Dave Aranda experiment.
Okay.
We're in year 3 of Aranda. They went 2-7, they went 12-2, and they went 7-6. So that 12-2 year, I do believe they were 6-1 in one-score games.
Mm-hmm.
One of those being one of the most hilarious college football games of all time against TCU.
Shout out.
And it's not great. Aranda has not beaten TCU, I think is one thing that we can say just starting out there. And despite having the much better team in at least one of those teams, I think this is the year that we figure out, okay, is this ever going to work? Not that it hasn't worked, not that there hasn't been proof of concept post-COVID year, right? Had a team, got the right breaks, played disciplined football, and benefited from a down year from a lot of other teams in 2021, I think. He's on coordinator number 5 and 6 now.
Yeah.
They've flipped over offensive and defensive coordinator multiple times. Clearly he's willing to bring in guys who know football and talk and listen to them, but he's also very willing to part with them if he feels like it's not working out. It's interesting that the turnover has been so great under Aranda, who's been kind of championed for his even-handedness, his consistency, if you will. And I think that we are hovering around Aranda not having an identity as a leader of a program. And I think that's a problem at a place like Baylor.
So I'll push back on that just a bit, where he brings in Jeff Grimes again for the second year coming back as offensive coordinator. And then it's the second or third year for Jeff?
Second, because year one was No, third. So year one was Larry Fedora in 2020.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
Larry concussions aren't real, Fedora.
Okay. Well, allegedly.
It's complicated. And then Grimes, after the Zach Wilson season,
right.
Grimes came in 2021. So this is year 3 for Grimes.
It's year 3 for Grimes. And then Matt Powledge comes back as defensive coordinator, who was at Aranda for 2 years and then went to be the co-DC at Oregon for a year. And then now he's back as the primary defensive coordinator for Aranda. So I agree, in titles, things may have changed around, but this is still a lot of the same personnel at the top that it has been for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the strong departure in Ron Roberts and what might be the issues there. But I think that Baylor is at a position right now under Aranda where their recruiting isn't, amazing. No. Not even by Baylor standards, I think is fair to say. Their recruiting is not amazing. And they, again, have shown similar to like peers like TCU and even Oklahoma State, hey, when the conference is having a down year and we're at the top of our development cycle, we can compete. But I think last year was a predictably down year. Their offensive line was good, but their skill positions kind of turned over. Mm-hmm. And perversely, they're going to do the same thing again this year. But the big deal last year, I think, was the defense was just not good in any way, shape, or form. And that's kind of really the unacceptable part, I think, for Baylor and why we saw a change at DC. So I don't know if the Aranda experiment is we're not at like Lord of the Rings. This quest is on the edge of the knife kind of stuff yet. But we're talking about like, hey, if they can't put together like a solid 8-4 or 9-3 this year, we're looking at like, all right, what is Baylor's new long-term equilibrium really going to be?
Yeah, it might be Grimes kind of getting the boot. It was funny when we were doing the research for this podcast. I saw 2 articles when I, just Googled Jeff Grimes just to get his history and bring up some, stats and stuff like that. The first 2 articles I saw were both from Sports Illustrated, the Zombie Sports Illustrated. The first one was in May 2022. Baylor OC Jeff Grimes is Broyles Award favorite. And then the next one I saw was from November 22, and it was, is it time for Baylor to move on from Jeff Grimes? And I just thought that was very, very fun. They were like,
I don't really like being the one who's like, I'm not going to tweet this out, I don't think, but I never was the one to be like, oh, look at how right we were about this stuff. But I think there's 2 things that we brought up and kind of looked into was the BYU splits before and after Jeff Grimes kind of went up into the booth and got off the sideline. And we saw that like BYU's offense got dramatically better when Grimes was less involved. Factually, just objectively, that's what happened. And 2, we talked about last year, like they lost 75% of their targets and 75% of their non-quarterback rushing attempts. I personally got a lot of flack about saying their ceiling was 8 wins, but like, I feel like that was pretty good, pretty on the nose for what was going to happen. And Baylor is a place that a lot of people like to be perpetually optimistic about. And I think it's just important to remember, like, Big 12 development cycles apply here. And even though they were bad last year, it doesn't mean they're automatically going to be good this year because their development is still a little weird on both sides of the ball. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that I can't talk today. The perpetual optimism around Baylor is interesting considering the history of the school and how just dismal they were before Art got there. But then you look, even after Broyles left, Jim Grove went 7-6 in a caretaker role. Matt Rule.
Jim Grove went 6-0 and then 1-6.
And then yeah, right. So not a whole lot of optimism there. But Matt Rule, okay, you start 1-11, then he goes 7-6, 11-3. He takes the Panthers job. Aranda starts bad, 2-7, but then they rebound and he's 12-2. So I don't know if it's perpetual optimism or just optimism that eventually things are going to bounce. And this is a year where they need to bounce.
Yep. And in a way that it's not, the economist in me wants to talk about the dead cat bounce, right? You throw a dead cat out of the window, right, it's going to bounce. And what are we doing here? I don't think Baylor's a dead cat by any stretch of imagination, but let's get into the specifics a little bit and talk a little bit about their season last year. They did not have what many people would call an excellent season. I think 6-7, got their absolute asses whooped against Service Academy in the freezing cold in TCU Stadium in the Armed Forces Bowl to cement the losing season. Really can't blame them for that. No one wanted to be there. I understand that totally. But they really did have a couple tough losses, 1, 2, 3 3-score losses. But Grant, I don't know if people have internalized, they played their last 3 regular season games against ranked teams. That was actually kind of a brutal slate, which will come in a little bit as we talk about the schedule this year. They had Kansas State, followed by TCU, followed by Texas. And the Kansas State game, they didn't compete. But the TCU game, I mean, we all saw what happened there. They very well could have won that game. And part of the reason I'm thinking about the Aranda experiment is they punted when they should have gone for it on 4th and 2, and they lost the game. They gave TCU a chance to win. And that to me is kind of, for what Aranda's reputation was, that felt like cracking in the moment, honestly. And a pretty big misstep. So we'll see how, that ripples through. But then Texas, they had a lead. They ran out of gas. I think they had a double-digit lead at one point. They lose 4 to end the season there. They were overall had 30.4 points per game, which is 9th in the new Big 12. They allowed 28.1 points per game, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the Big 12. That point differential on the season was 2.72, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the Big 12. So again, very much like the last couple of teams we've looked at, very much in the middle there, just not really exceptional at one side of the ball and not really able to differentiate themselves out of the middle of the pack because of all, just because of some, what I think are substantial flaws.
Yeah, and two, kind of like we talked about with Texas Tech, they're mediocre, right? They don't necessarily distinguish themselves, but you think, especially of Aranda, as, listen, they may stink on offense, but Aranda's a good defensive coach. And sure, I mean, there may be some coordinator issues aside, but the fact that they couldn't distinguish themselves even in a split between offense and defense on their own team is very interesting to me.
I'll get in. Well, and in fact, I think that like their offense was actually better than they expected it to be. And the defense just absolutely fell off, which is crazy given the hype they had. But again, they lost. I mean, Jalen Petries don't grow on trees, right? I think we said that about Tyree Wilson's, but that's true. If there was a farm where both of those players kind of grew, I think someone could make a lot of money getting them into IMG Academy and churning out 5 stars. But Baylor last year, 51st in EPA per play margin, but not the Baylor of Aranda that you think about. 43rd on offensive EPA per play, 85th on defensive EPA per play. Grant, net points per drive plus 0.17. That's 56th in the nation. 27 on offense, much better than last year, but 92nd on defense. Just an absolute kind of falling off on defense. I'm excited to hear your thoughts about the defensive side of the ball, but yes, very clearly not a typical Aranda team this season.
That 3rd and 4th down success rate for defense, just to skip ahead a little bit, is frightening. 103rd in the nation in allowing 3rd and 4th down success. So
yeah, not great. And I mean, we'll break down the specifics on both sides, but yeah, it's pretty rough. Before we get there, let's talk about before we get to the sides of the unit. Already at 18 minutes. Shoot, we're going long already.
All right, yeah.
Let's talk to me about recruiting, and let's lock in here.
Yeah. So you mentioned that earlier. Baylor's not been recruiting up to Baylor standards this year. 2023, the composite rating is actually the highest it's been since 2018.
I stand corrected.
Now, there's not a lot of variance, right? 34th this year, 2 4-stars coming out of high school. 37th in 22, 41 in 2021, 49th in 2020, 35th in 2019, and 29th in 2018. That was a class with Jerry Bohannon and Tyquan Thornton and all those kind of guys that were big studs coming out of high school. The big story this year is that they lose out on, is it Austin Novosad, who flipped to Oregon at the last minute. He was a number 9 quarterback.
Novosad.
He was the number 9 quarterback in nation coming out of Dripping Springs, Texas. This podcast is over. And so that was going to be a big QB get for Baylor, like looking on down the future. Now, they do bring in Sawyer Robertson from Mississippi State, who might compete with Blake Shapen for the job. We'll get to that as well. They bring in 3 4-stars. Dom Richardson, running back from Oklahoma State. Our listeners of the Purple Theory podcast will be familiar with his work. Clark Barrington, who was a 4-star interior offensive lineman from BYU, plus his 3-star tackle brother, Campbell Barrington.
The Barrington brothers, live and in person.
Brothers. And then Keatron Jackson, a 4-star transfer wide receiver from Arkansas. They lose, however, some key players. Al Walcott, who kind of played that star role that Petrie played, transferred to Arkansas. Micah Mazkua transferred to Florida, another 4-star transfer moving out. And then Squirrel Williams to Louisiana Tech. I'm just going to miss having him around in the backfield. he goes by Squirrel, and that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think Squirrel got a little dinged up, and Richard Reese kind of showed up, and it just really was like, frick, there's not a spot for you. So yeah, disappointing. But yeah, so a little bit of turnover, maybe some hope for some fresh meat on the offensive line that can kind of help things out. But yeah, they do turn over a lot here. So I am a little bit interested to see kind of how they can do that. If we're talking about 2023, we're talking about expectations. Circa has them minus 120 at over 7 when they opened. I don't know where that's moved since then. But so that win total is 7, and they're expected to go slightly over. FPI has them 5th in the Big 12 at 10.7 points, but better than average team. SP Plus has them 5th in the Big 12 and 32nd overall, 30th on offense, 47th on defense, which 47th on defense would be a pretty big leap from kind of where they were last year in terms of those efficiency numbers. So almost as many questions about Baylor this year as there were last year, frankly.
Yeah, and different questions too, at different position groups. But the question is still like, is there enough depth to fulfill the goal of what Aranda wants to do on both sides of the ball? Speaking of sides of the ball, Parker, let's not beat around the bush. Help me talk about Jeff Grimes's reliably violent offense.
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit with BYU, and they do run similar offenses. I liked a quote the other day from Grimes where he said he quote tweeted something, one of those like, you know how those Twitter accounts will do like the influencer bro kind of threads, and they'll say like, this weird trick, follow for more or whatever. So people are doing that with like football plays, and Jeff Grimes just quote tweeted one of those, and he's like, I never call anything inside or outside zone, so this is wrong. And so I just appreciated that he had time on his hands to be like, no, this is not what we do, because they do call it a wide zone. They'll run it in, they'll run it out. But the general idea is they want to run if they can. We've seen multiple games where they were outmatched. One of their plans was, we can teach and install a very varied playbook. We can do a lot of different stuff. Let's throw the book at you if we're outmatched. But they very much do want to run the ball. If they can, they will run the ball. They were 100th in rush rate over expected last season, 5.2% percentage points more than the average team they were rushing. And so very, very want to be efficient, not super explosive, a little bit more successful than they were explosive, especially in the run game. That run game was 20th in success rate, 39th in EPA per rush. So they did not have as much of the consistency there. And then without Tyquan Thornton last year, that passing game, only 35th in passing success rate, 44th in EPA per pass. One thing to note about this offense is they really do want to set up the quarterback for success. I think they did a great job in 2021, kind of asking Jerry Bohannon to do what he could do well and not asking him to do things he couldn't do. Last year, especially the BYU game, I think Blake Shapen had like 4 passes in the second half of that BYU game that went to overtime. They were just scared to trust him. And I understand that. I understand why you might be, but it did feel like that they did a bad job of setting up the quarterback well. You're going to see a lot of double slants. You're going to see a lot of wide zone. You're going to see a lot of play action out of this unit. We'll see if with the offensive line turnover, if they can, protect well enough to run play action. And see what they can do with RPO stuff with kind of Blake Shapen there back again. But generally, you're going to see the same kind of wide zone play action, run while we can, and then try to hit the big play that we've seen out of Baylor the last couple of years. I think there's a couple key questions that this unit faces. And I mentioned this earlier. Last year, they kept the offensive line, but they turned over the skill core. This year, it's the opposite. So how do you take a step forward when the pendulum keeps swinging, right? It's not like, oh, we're going to get a little better, It's like, oh, this whole unit is flipped over. So I think that's a little rough for them. Can Shapen take a step is something that's really on my mind. I'm so sympathetic to quarterbacks. I think it's very rare that I look at quarterback and be like, he's garbage. Because development, like these guys are past a certain threshold of talent. They are raw and they can develop. My question is, Shapen won a quarterback battle last year and then basically got flamed the entire season for not being good enough. And I don't really know if it was his fault. We can talk about that. But this year, he's got a real quarterback battle and he won it. But I mean, that's going to be looming in the background, dude. That dude didn't transfer down from the SEC to not play. Like, I don't know. Well, so we'll talk about kind of what they did there and all that. Can Shapen take a step kind of with someone in his rearview mirror? The third and the fourth are questions, I think, from last year as well. Consistency and sticking to principles. I think that fourth down in my mind, the Baylor game, the TCU game, I don't want to overstate its importance, but I think it is really important to say, like, Aranda's a little bit worried about stuff. If because that's one of those, Grant, you go for fourth down, I think it was your own 28 or something. You go for 4th and 2 on your own 28 with under a minute left, and TCU kicks field goal and wins, you might get fired. Like legitimately, it's weird, right? But you lost anyway because you did, and you punted and you gave them the ball back. So like it's kind of like Aranda wasn't known for a guy who was going to try to lose the right way. And it really felt like against TCU try to lose the right way. So I'm worried about as they stress test, if they don't take a step forward, can he kind of hold things together, especially on the offensive side of the ball? Can they continue to be aggressive even when stuff is not going their way?
Joey McGuire would have Leroy Jenkins the hell out of that 4th down. Like he would have thrown like he would have ran mesh or something. Like he would have tried to go for it.
Joey McGuire is like he's like what's his name? Aaron Eckhart and Batman, the Two-Face, where he's just like flipping a coin. Joey McGuire just flips a coin. He's like, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, what the heck? And Gus Johnson.
It's a weighted coin. But Baylor goes for it a lot too, and Baylor's a little less coy about like running it on 2nd down so that they can get 4th and manageable. Lastly, again, the last time that we've seen Baylor have a successful offense, they had an absolute bowling ball, XFL legend, leading XFL rusher, Abram Smith, and Tyquan Thornton, who is as fast a downfield threat as you're going to see, and it's super easy for Jerry Bohannon to just chuck it and find the guy open downfield, right? So like, how are they going to move forward without kind of that clear recipe? They've got some interesting personnel, but let's dive into the quarterback. I'm talking way too much on the offensive side of the ball. I will try to go faster here hold on. I'm not going to talk faster, Grant. We're just going to get through the material better.
Hey, as John Wooden said, be quick, but don't hurry.
Yes, exactly. I'll keep it snappy. Right. Shapen's the quarterback. He won the battle in the spring, which is great. But Sawyer Robinson right there behind him, 4-star recruit, very productive in pass-heavy situations, stays on top of the ball. This is a scouting report with mostly overhead delivery, drives the ball down the seams on throws to the middle of the field and on outs, really spins it, shows encouraging ball placement in tight windows, not a dual threat, but nimble enough to make the first wave miss. So I love that, what they're talking about him. I think they've got a good option. If we're looking at Shapen last year, I don't think he was as bad as he kind of got a reputation for. 79.6 passing grade. Average depth of target was 9. Adjusted completion percentage, 75. Baylor did have a bit of a drop problem that we'll talk about with the wide receivers. 18.9 pressure to sack ratio is not amazing, but it could be worse. I think he can improve on that. He's a little touch and go with his feet in the pocket, a little happy feet, I think is how an old school football guy would kind of talk about that. But his big time throw rate was 3.9. His turnover worthy play rate was 2.7. Too high, trying to force things. I have a note in here, Grant, that's like this is an office quote about a pop culture movie, but it's like he like curves the bullet like in Wanted. Like he legitimately had a throw at TCU where you could be like, oh, you just threw a curveball. Like you played baseball, I saw your wrist snap, and the ball legitimately like curved in. It was amazing. And so I think there's some really interesting talent there. So I'm interested in Shapen, but I am worried about his ability to kind of consistently be there downfield. If you look at kind of pressure, really, really big fall off under pressure, 48% completion compared to 68% completion. Mm-hmm. His passing grade falls from 88.9 and kept clean, which I like a clean pocket. I like that. But 48.6 under pressure, the offensive line is going to get worse. What are we doing here? The play action splits, I think he was not as good on, or he's a little bit better on play action, which is, what you'd expect, but not substantially. 65.8% completion on play action, 63.3 on no play action. Lastly, deep ball completion percentage, Grant, 85.9 passing grade, but only 31.7 completion grade. So I'm willing to say that the grading there is probably not appropriately divvying the credit between the responsibility between what's going on. There's something off there in the deep game is kind of how I frame that. So can Robertson come in and be great? Yes. Is Blake Shapen good enough? I think so. I think he's got a lot of athleticism, a lot of talent, and with another year in the system, and with maybe an offseason of them learning how to not pretend that he's Jerry Bohannon, I think they could ask him to do things he's good at. He's got really, really nice touch. I think they have two guys here who could come in and start and be better, one of the better quarterbacks in the league.
Completely agree. I have this as a 12. I think you do too. I think Shapen's earned the role.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Grant, I'm going Oh yeah, I'm going 12. I thought I had 13, but that was Texas Tech last week. Yes, okay. I love that. I love that comparison. That's great. I'm going to go 12 here as well. Two guys who could start, two guys with a high ceiling, and the system's very quarterback friendly. I like this room.
Yeah, I do too. A room I don't like quite as much, although I am excited for running back Parker.
Yeah, I initially had this at a 9 because I just love Richard Reese, but then I was like, Don Richardson, dang it. And so I got it down to 7. I think this is one of the weirdest transfers.
Yeah.
In college. I'm so interested by this. I don't understand it.
Maybe there's like a great idea. Maybe it's going to work.
I don't think Dom Richardson was very good between the tackles. And I think that Baylor was very bad between the tackles. So if you're going to bring in a guy, I don't know, it feels like a weird mix. But Dom Richardson, a solid running back from Oklahoma State, a talented guy, really didn't feel. I think a lot of Oklahoma State's problem in the run game last year was like, Dom Richardson is just a guy. He's not a dude. Mm-hmm. And Baylor doesn't necessarily need a dude. Maybe they just need a guy that can take some carries and get in some situations. But I'm a little skeptical that he raises the ceiling very much. Maybe you get some thunder and lightning with him and Richard Reese. I think that's how they're going to try to do it. Richard Reese ended up leading the team in attempts last year, 189 out of nowhere, freshman, right? 5.1 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, 0 fumbles. Grant, 86.8 rushing grade. And he's kind of a little guy, 2.79 yards of contact, yards after contact, 31 rushes of 10 plus yards on 189 attempts. So it's about 1 in 6. That's not bad. They do that right? Yeah, 1 in 6, 30 out of 180.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, RIP Squirrel. Hope he goes to Louisiana Tech and is hilarious in Sonny Cumbie's offense. But I think that they really fell off last year because they didn't have the automatic get out of jail free card that was Abram Smith. I think that absolutely helped. And frankly, if we're talking about rushing, Jerry Bohannon's legs, for everything that Jerry Bohannon was good at or bad at, the dude was so athletic. He could just take off. And so I don't think they had that well in 2021. I don't even think the run game was as good getting them a lead as it was preserving a lead. And then last year with a couple of blown leads, you have to wonder, they couldn't run the ball well. They couldn't really control the game script. Will they be able to do that again this year? I don't know. I don't know that Dom Richards inspires me very much. So I'm going to go 7 out of 10 here. It's a fine room. It's not bad. I like Reese a lot. I would like to see Reese more involved in the pass game to make me, more confident about kind of the ceiling on this offense. Reese had, let me see, only 13 targets last season. Not great. Not a lot of yards, 84 total yards. So if they can get him a little more involved and maybe open things up a little bit, that's interesting. But just as a running back, I think he had, one or two good games and there's still a lot more to be seen from him. Yeah. Texas State, Kansas, Texas Tech, not exactly great rushing defenses that he was putting up numbers against.
Yeah. I agree. Get him out in the swing, get him out in the flat, and just let Dom Richardson try to run people over down the middle, even though he wasn't all that good at doing that at Oklahoma State. I had this as a 7 out of 10 as well for Baylor in the running back room.
How big is Dom Richardson? We're going to keep moving. I'm sorry. We're going to keep moving.
No, I pictured him as a cannonball, but go ahead and I'll tell you. I'll find it on the
6'0", 210. Oh, he's small. Okay. Yeah, he's not as big as I thought he was. Yeah. That's okay. I'm right. I remember Oklahoma State last year. I was like, Dom, you're just not cutting well. Like I just didn't feel like he had a good flow, and it makes me worried because the wide zone, even if it's like inside, he's still got to go out and come back in. I don't know. This is a weird fit. Maybe he'll be great, and I'll eat my words. That's fine. But like, it's weird.
I think this is closer to a 9 than it is a 6 for me. If Reese really takes off, and Richardson is a
interesting okay
backup, I think it's a very high ceiling 7.
No,
don't make the joke you want to make. Go ahead.
She's like a 6 in New York, but she's a 7 in Scranton. Wide receiver unit. Don't hate it. Got some issues. Don't hate it. Gonna go ahead and say I have them at a solid 8 here. I think the biggest thing about this unit is that the drops last year were just like infuriating.
Yeah, man.
Gavin Holmes is gone, correct? Am I correct about that?
Yes, you're correct.
Gavin Holmes had like 2 of the most timely, annoying drops. Like I think Baylor would have won I had them higher in the power ratings in the record all last season because Gavin Holmes, super productive, 2.9 yards per route run on 34 targets, but the dude just felt like he just couldn't hold on the ball. Monterey Baldwin, 59.2 grade on drops. He was 2.62 yards per route run. Fast. Grant.
Yeah.
He's fast dude. He's real fast dude. And that's a nice counter. You've got Josh Cameron, who's pretty versatile. He had 38 targets last year, 1.76 yards per route run, but again, 60.7 drop. Excuse me, 60.7 drop grade. He was a little more versatile. So Monterey Baldwin was 86% in the slot. Josh Cameron was 84% out wide. Where things get interesting is then you also have Hal Presley, who younger guy, 51 targets and a 73% grade on drops, which is nice, but only 1.04 yards per route run, 95% out wide. So you kind of got these two out wide guys. But it's not obvious, who was kind of the number one option. I think they bring on Keytron Jackson from Arkansas, and he does offers a big body, 6'2", 210 to some of these faster guys, and maybe can kind of spread things out. I do wonder how much Baldwin, Cameron, and Presley benefited from Ben Sims and kind of the consistency of a tight end option. And I don't believe that Kelsey Johnson is a Ben Sims type. Right. I think he's a fine, but I think he's going to be more of a blocker. I think he's going to be less of a red zone pass threat. I mean, like Ben Sims touchdown overs last year it was like almost automatic he was going to score a touchdown, man, because just like you knew in the red zone they were going to go to him. Keytron Jackson, a no big drops. Body guy, maybe he can take some of those. Maybe he can take some of those receptions, but no drops out of that side of the ball. Or for him there. And last season he was 84% in the wide, 13% in the slot. So like can move around a little bit. They have some weapons, but again, I think the ceiling here is a little low. It's just, I think people like to see fast dudes and think like, oh, they're going to be better. I don't know if fast means creating separation necessarily for this offense.
Sure. I would compare this unit a little bit without recency bias to Texas Tech, like we talked about last week, in terms of, I don't know how like outstanding anyone is, but they have someone that can do everything. And also, they're just really fast. Downside is they probably drop the ball a little bit more than Tech. I have this as an 8.
I had it as an 8 and just kept getting mad about Gavin Holmes. But I think no, I have this as an 8 too. I'm good. Yeah. I think I had it as a 9, and then I looked at really what it was is the loss of Sims, because I think I'm including him as a receiver here. He moves away, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if they're going to have that kind of underneath red zone option, and that might help. You get some of these little guys in the red zone, they're going to get covered up. Is Keytron Jackson going to be the big body they can go to? I don't know. We'll see. Yep. Kelsey Johnson had a couple interesting red zone touchdowns, but it's a good unit. 8, one of the better units. Looking at where we have the rest of the Big 12, I mean, that's second behind TCU. I feel good about that. Better than Texas Tech, right?
100%. I'm right there with you.
Let's go to the offensive line really quick. I know we're going really long again here, and I'll stop apologizing for that. But they bring man. So if I'm doing this right and I'm reading who's here and who's gone, you're losing top 3 in terms of blocking snaps. Connor Galvin gone, Jacob Gall gone, Micah Mazkua gone, Grant Miller gone. Gavin Byers is your lone holdout, and Grant, he
had some issues.
Is going to play. Yeah, this is like damning with faint praise. Grant, I think he's going to be a much better guard this year than he was a tackle last year. I don't think he was necessarily bad, but he was on a good unit and got hid. They're not going to have tackle. He's not going to play tackle. You've got the Barrington brothers come in. You've got a couple of younger guys who might hop up. I think if you look at like pressures, especially for, excuse me, you look at pressures for Chapin. I mean, he was only pressured on 27% of his dropbacks. Like they did really well last year. And they're going to turn over a lot this year. And, Grimes has had some and what's his name? Who's the OL coach? Mateos, maybe?
Sure. I'll pull that for you.
One of them might be a bad dude. I don't remember. I can't police everything here, but I don't actually care that much. But I'm just saying I can't remember. It's like they wanted to hire a guy, but then it fell through. And then this guy. So I think it's Mateos. But good O-line coach and have some development, but this is going to be the first kind of show me year, right? Like 3 years in, you basically had your starters the last 2 years. You're bringing in 2 transfers. Can you shore up enough to get those reps? I think this is a 9 out of 15. I think this is again, you just turn over a lot, man. And that's how things go in the Big 12. And the skill talent's going to be good enough to kind of help them a little bit, but I don't know if they'll be able to breathe long enough to kind of reach their offensive ceiling. This is, like I said, with Texas Tech, again, limiting factor of the offense here is the offensive line.
I think Mascoa leaving really, really hampers this offensive line. If you need the Barrington brothers to save you as immediate transfers, both of them, hey, that's a cool storyline. I'm excited to watch it, but also I have this unit as an 8. I think they're going to be pretty stinky. So just to wrap up on the offense, I have
we need a little more consistency out of Blake Shapen. What could go wrong?
You have the Baylor Bears at a 36 out of 50 on offense. I have them as a 35 out of 50. That would put them 4th for me out of the 6 teams that we've rated. It would put them 4th for you as well, or tied for 3rd out of the.
Tied with Kansas, which feels like a compliment after last year, but we'll see. Yeah. So that's there. You want to take me to the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, we'll run through this pretty quick, and then we'll get to schedule predictions, and then we'll get you on your merry way for this Friday episode if you're listening to this on podcast. So, as I mentioned earlier, Matt Powledge, who also serves as safety coach, comes from Oregon, where he was co-defensive coordinator. He was safeties coach and special teams under Aranda at Baylor for 2 years before that. To quote Dave Aranda, Matt is an elite defensive mind who has a great understanding of our system on and off the field. I think, Parker, this is sort of, as we talked about at the beginning, a return to what Aranda wants to do and those fundamental concepts that he's been switching in and out of so much. I think that familiarity with Aranda's system is going to be key. All right, let's play this game. What do you call it? Is it a 3-3-5? Is it a augmented 3-4? What do you call Aranda's system?
I think I call this more of a 3-5 than I do.
Okay.
Than I do Texas Tech, like the legitimate, because they're not doing as much disguising. They're doing a lot more like it's not quite pattern matching because 3-3-5 is not pattern matching, but like they're doing a little bit more of like we're going to line up in a certain way if you line up in a certain way. And Texas Tech more is like, oh, I'm silly, where am I? And so I don't think this is that gimmicky.
Okay. I should also say, if you want to learn more about this, go listen to the interview we did, the episode we did with Cody Alexander at Match Quarters. It's somewhere back in our archives. We went through the Aranda defense. It's fantastic. They need a stud holding down that star role. Whether you want to classify that role as a crashing linebacker or a floating safety or a run stopper, because they pretty much do it all, depending on the play. Jalen Peachy was a clear example of that, but Al Walcott was really good at it last year. He co-led the team in tackles with 59 from that kind of hybrid linebacker safety position. He's now an Arkansas Razorback. Baylor needs better production up front. Siaki Ika was the lone first-team All-Big 12 selection on defense last year for Baylor. He's now a Cleveland Brown. Dylan Doyle was the lone second-team defensive player for Baylor. He transferred out, I believe, or got an XFL contract, one of the two. I think it's the XFL. So 2 key questions here. The line has to improve, period, point blank. In this Aranda system, they're going to, like, those 3 guys up front. And I included, in my kind of write-up here, I included the jack role in there just because I think they play closer to the line of scrimmage, even if it is maybe more of a true 3-3-5. Who fills in for Doyle and who fills in for Walcott? Those are the 2 main kind of areas where they're going to have to improve. So, go into the defensive line, Parker. Spoiler, this I am curious to hear why you have this unit rated where you do. So, Ika's a big name that's no longer on this roster. Okay, they do return a lot of talent up front. TJ Franklin, Gabe Hall both return, as does Garmin Randolph, who plays that jack role. He was pretty good last year, had an 83.1 tackle grade. And I should mention that for all the good that Siaki Ika did, his tackle grade was like a 26.1. He was not.
Yeah, he's one of those he's one of those no stats guys, and
I
also think that like him and Player got much ado and didn't necessarily deliver on it.
Player also not on the roster anymore. Neither is Chidi Ogbanyana either.
I think that's 3 NFL guys. Yeah, but
3 NFL guys, but all 3 basically playing nose tackle, or at least that's where they were lined up there at the depth chart. Franklin's overall grade was a 67. Hall's was a 70. That's got to get better if this defense is going to get better. It was a really curious recruiting cycle. They didn't bring in any like high-level high school defensive linemen, which makes me think they're going to try to go to the portal. They do bring in Trevin Maye coming in from Oregon who could help at edge. Maybe you shift Hall to nose here. I think that hole at nose is going to be gaping. Randolph, Franklin, and Hall should take some steps forward, and the Bears will be, they'll be hard tackling. But I had this as a 12 out of 15. I don't know. I had it as 11, and then I saw your rating and bumped it up 1 just because I was afraid I missed something.
I have it as a 14 because I think Gabe Hall and TJ Franklin are two of the best defensive linemen in the league. And then you only have to have one other guy there. And if you look at like who's coming back, you got like Randolph and Jackson are going to be around there, plus the transfer. Like, I think they're fine.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, they are going to have to a little bit like, I wonder, I wish we don't have alignment for, yeah, here we do. Okay. Nope, it's just D-line alignment. A gap. I'm sorry, this is bad. This is bad TV. I'm looking at PFF defensive alignment snap outs. They do have it.
Yeah.
Gabe Hall played 26 snaps in the A gap. Nobody else played at all. So that's not a lot, but that is some. I don't know if he'll do it like consistently, but like on late downs, they can rotate him in and bring in a couple edge guys and he can be sufficiently disruptive. I like this unit. I think this unit is like so much better than the other units, which is going to help the cornerback situation, which I think is pretty bad. But
yeah,
I think between Hall and Franklin and kind of their versatility, you got a couple guys who can run the edge. If they're a little leaner than they were last year, maybe not as stout physically, but much more athletic, much more harder to defend. I think this is a pretty good good unit. This is one of the best units.
Okay.
Yeah.
I listen. Well, I really like Gabe Hall. I'm excited to see what he does because I do think he's a little bit versatile. So moving to linebackers. Again, I moved Jack down to the front, and because I can, and this is my podcast, I'm throwing Star into the linebacker group because it's a hybrid. So also, I'm trying to balance out the points, because otherwise it would have gotten pretty dicey there for some of these units on Baylor's defense. Replacing Dylan Doyle is going to be the issue. I think the staff, from what I could tell from last year, likes Tyrone Brown. He played 183 snaps last year as a redshirt freshman, made 16 tackles. So he could kind of slip into that role as a redshirt sophomore. Matt Jones, who, thank you, is the clear returning
Jacksonville Jaguars and Arkansas Razorbacks dual sport legend. Matt Jones.
Also Houston rapper, Matt Jones. As the clear returning weak side backer, 534 snaps, 40 tackles. He's your starter there. Will Williams was a good rotation guy at 120 snaps last year. So I think you'll see some more of him on the defense. At star, Devin Neal had 358 snaps last year, and on the depth chart, he was listed behind Walcott. So I think he'll step into this role. Listen, Walcott had to follow Petrie. Let's see if Neal can follow Walcott and kind of keep that up. This is a solid, if unspectacular unit, but I like how Aranda's system uses guys kind of in that almost that kind of liminal space between the defensive secondary and up front, the middle of the field, but not the middle between the hashes, the 10 to 20 yard range. So I'm excited to watch it. I actually have this rated pretty decently at an 8 out of 10.
I think that the turnover here is pretty substantial, and I think that last year they relied a lot on athleticism, and you combine that, like, you don't have Doyle and you don't have the system 100% down. I think there's going to be some issues here, so I'm slightly lower. I totally lost my sheet there to make sure. Yep, I have a 7, so not terrible, but I would say I'm closer to a 6 than an 8, kind of to steal your language from earlier.
Okay. And then we move to defensive backs, which, let's see. Devin Lemire played 756 snaps at safety as a redshirt freshman. We'll go ahead and plug him right in there. But after that, it gets thin. Mike Harris kind of filled the role left by Christian Morgan and Devin Neal. These are all question marks because, at corner, Lorando Johnson transferred to Arkansas and Mark Milton graduated. Not good. A.J. McCarty was the third guy. Maybe you bring in Isaiah Dunson, who transferred in from Miami. He was a 4-star out of high school.
I believe A.J. McCarty just transferred, like, very recently.
Oh, did he? My apologies, folks. We're just now getting word of this.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, June 12th. So like last week. Yeah, not very, 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 very recent. Yeah, and it's not in the portal. Like, he'd have to get a waiver to play this fall, so it's not as newsy. So yeah, I'm kind of went on the radar. But I'm glad shout out to I think Adam Lunt in the DMs and I were talking. I think Adam and Ian Boyd and I were talking about that, and that's the reason I knew about it. So, their defensive backs were bad. They were bad, and they lost a couple guys who were bad, and they're going to try and refill them with new ones. And guess what? Dave Aranda asks a lot of his defensive backs, and it's gonna be tough.
Okay, I bumped him down on the A.J. McCarty news. Thank you, Parker, for breaking that for me.
Yeah. Do we agree now at 6?
Yes, we agree now at 6.
Yeah.
Just saying, Isaiah Dunson transfers from Miami. He was a 4-star out of high school, and a Johnny Carter comes in from Utah State. Are the 2 transfer quarterbacks that they brought in.
I do like a transfer up. I'm interested in that. Yeah, interesting.
So,
but we'll see. So you have them at a 6. What does that put your defensive total there?
I'm updating the sheet here. It puts me at a 24 for the Baylor Bears.
Dang. I'm at 27, which is second highest in the conference so far, which is
I didn't update the sheet for my defensive lineman. I updated him to a 12. So 26. You was a 27.
Okay. This does put Baylor. Okay, so coaching and special teams, I have a 13.
Same.
So this puts Baylor at 76, the highest rated team we've had so far, which kind of goes with my priors. I think I released a power rating where I had them 4th in the league, like in January or something. So yeah, that makes sense, but that does make me a little nervous. They're 1 point better than Texas Tech, 5 points better than TCU. But I don't think this is where like the empirics and priors are getting together. Cause like, I don't think I would take them -4 against TCU at home or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I have Baylor at 74. Again, that's the highest in the Big 12 so far. As I lose my voice, TCU at a 72 and Texas Tech at a 70.5. I think because this scale is so heavily weighted on offense, that makes sense. Even with the qualms up front, sort of those qualms on the back end of the defense probably don't get built into the overall score, and it's designed that way. So I think we just spent 7 minutes talking about how much Baylor's going to struggle on the back end, and then also it doesn't matter because they have so much talent on the offensive end. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess like if you told me blind, like returning quarterback, super fast wide receivers, pretty great defensive linemen, and a good coach, I'd be like, yeah, they're gonna step up. So interesting. Let's see how the schedule kind of goes out. Yeah.
All right. So you start with 4 home games in a row, hosting the Texas State Bobcats. I'll call it
and a little different. I'll say a little different. What Baylor normally did, like in the past, was just like play awful opponents and beat the ever loving heck out of them and try to ramp up. And like last year with BYU, but this year with Utah, they're like playing a real life football game in the non-con, which is not what they have done historically. So be interesting to see the ripple effects of that. They're going to beat Texas State, even though I love a Texas State over.
I do love a Texas State over.
Bobcats.
Taking a loss at Utah.
Against it's home versus Utah, right?
Yes, but I don't care.
I still going to go loss. It's going to go loss.
Yeah. Never schedule Utah in the non-con unless you're Bama or something. Just don't bother.
Dude, Utah's been super ambitious though. They're playing Baylor and Florida.
I know. Yeah. It's gonna be hot for Utah. Okay, Long Island win.
Yeah, go Sharks, but win.
Okay. Did TCU play them? They played some other kind of big school.
Long Island was West Virginia played Long Island, I think, and we talked about them being the Sharks. And then Long Island does baseball every year, and I think they were in the NCAA basketball tournament recently.
Okay, I know LIU Brooklyn is the Blackbirds. That's not here nor there. Home for Texas. I had this as a loss for Baylor.
Loss, which would be 2 home losses to start the season. Woof.
Yeah, but when you put it that way, at UCF, I'm going to give them a bounce back here. I think this is a win.
I think I'm going to lean loss.
I refuse to pick the same game wrong in back-to-back, or pick it 2 different ways in back-to-back weeks. So I'm pulling up my prediction from Tech last week.
Well, just look at your rating compared to, I guess your rating for being.
Yeah, so it's, yeah. Let's see. I picked Texas Tech to lose to Baylor, and I'm still going to do that.
Then I'm going to say win. So, I'm going to say win slightly, 76, 75. I don't know. Did you look at what I said last week?
We both picked Baylor to win this game.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Then a bye, and then
this lines up really well, man. A bye before the vaunted Cincy matchup. The travel to the Nasty Natty. Golly, since I did VSiN podcast with Tim Miller last week to talk about the Big 12, and he was like, let's cover every team. And at one point I was like, dude, we don't have to cover Cincinnati. Like, you've heard me say that everyone is going to beat them, like auto win every game. Baylor's going to beat Cincinnati on the road. Absolutely.
All righty. I agree with that as well. Iowa State at home. I think this is a win for Baylor.
Yep. Win for Baylor.
Houston at home. I think this is going to be really interesting, but a win for Baylor all the same. Unless Dana
I think I'm going to say win. I think I'm going to win. That's 6-3. Yep.
At Kansas State, loss.
We got to go 2 out of 3 against Kansas State at Kansas State at TCU and West Virginia at home to get the over here. Woof, we're sweating it. Going to call that a loss at Kansas State.
At TCU, listen, until they prove me wrong, loss.
Yeah, I got to call. I think I got to call it a loss. This is where I'm going against my numbers a little bit, and maybe we'll revise these again for the season. I have TCU at 71, Baylor at a 76. So with home field advantage of 2.5, this should like technically be a Baylor favored game. But I'm going to go recent history, and it's late in the season, and they played Kansas State last week, so I'm going to go loss, even though it's against my numbers.
Yeah. So I have them at 8 wins. You have them at 7. 8-4 and 7-5.
Oh, and I said I like the over. Okay, so let me think about this for a second. Okay, so you've got to beat one of you got to beat one of UCF, who I think you'd beat at home, Kansas State, TCU. You just got to go 1 and 2 against those. That Utah and the non-con hurts, man. If it's a 6.5, I think you can get a 6.5 for Baylor somewhere. I'd go over, but a 7.5, I wouldn't go over. 7, you get the push, whatever. Not that you want to bet to push, but.
I want to look at Kansas
We're not
State's
playing
schedule.
That game. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not going to look at Kansas State's schedule, but let's think about that when we get to Kansas State. Because at least in my sort of prediction here, Baylor will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins on the hop plus a bye in the middle. And if Kansas State has a hard game before Baylor, I could see Baylor taking the Kansas State game.
Yeah. Let's do it. We got 2 seconds here. And while you're you want to randomize who we're going to get next week?
Yes, I do. Thank you for that.
Okay, so while I'm doing this, you're doing that. Kansas State has, if it is Kansas State, that would be serendipitous. That'd be funny. Kansas State goes to Texas the week before Baylor.
Okay.
That's spicy. That game is much more interesting. Okay, fun. Very fun.
All right, so who do we got left? Need Houston. Need UCF. We need Oklahoma State.
Oh, no, we did the whole podcast without losing you, and I think I lost you.
I think I'm insulting somebody by forgetting them to include them in the randomizer.
No, there we go. Found it back.
West Virginia. Got it. Okay. We are randomizing, and it is UCF.
Oh, I like that. All right, UCF next week. Go Knights. The second of the new Big 12 teams. Yeah. Okay, that'll be fun. Interesting to look at. Old Gus Miles on. This is great, Grant. This has been the Purple Theory podcast presented to you by Dave Campbell's Republic of Football and part of Dave Campbell's Republic of Football and presented in part by Home Field Apparel. You can check that out with a code at homefield.com, DCTF. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you follow Grant on Twitter, spelled like it sounds with all those vowels, at Grant McGalliard. And I'm, of course, Stats of War on Twitter. Be well. We'll catch you next time as we're talking about the UCF Knights.
Adios.